So when you hear people saying this,
do you know the general guidelines for alcohol is 1 drink a day for women and 2 drinks per day for men?
just because it's standard doesn't mean it is safe. Additionally, if you hear people saying this,
if you have to drink these. And try not to drink these at all.
My advice would be drink water and mind your business. Because when it comes to alcohol, alcohol might be the epitome of what's sweet in the goat mouth. Hey, Penguin, you could finish it off for me? Hi everyone, I'm Howard of Spencer's Whole Food Plant-Based Eats and Treats, where we believe that the path to good health is by changing and improving your food environment. I have covered quite a few health topics on this channel, especially related to the health of Trinidad and Tobago and how the government actions affect the health of a nation. And there was a quote by the former Minister of Health which encapsulates my whole attitude towards addressing these health topics.
Wherever there's an inconvenient truth to be told, you must not back away from it.
And this video is going to be no different as I address this inconvenient truth.
There seems to be a shifting demographic in alcohol consumption, especially among the female population in Trinidad and Tobago. The statement from Minister of Health, Terence Dialsing, during a meeting of Parliament's Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administrations inquiring into the prevalence of non-communicable diseases or NCDs. The Ministry of Health, in collaboration with the Pan American Health Organization and World Health Organization, conducted the STEP 2024 survey to gather information from the public to ascertain their risks or risk factors for NCDs. During the JSC inquiry on Wednesday, Director of the Non-Communicable Diseases Unit at the Ministry of Health, Dr. Maria Clapperton, presented the findings from the survey. The survey, which sampled 4,052 adults aged 18 to 69, revealed a prevalence of alcohol consumption at 51.5%, with 59.6% of males and 43.4% of females reporting alcohol use within a 30-day period.
10.9% increase between 2011 and 2024. And with respect to consumption patterns, it was observed that even though males consumed more alcohol than females, we noted a significant increase in the consumption of alcohol among females, and this was found to be an increase of 12.5%.
Minister of Health Terence Dialsing expressed concern about the findings. He admitted that excessive drinking tends to spike from the Christmas into the Carnival period and reassured that the Health Ministry and the National Alcohol and Drug Abuse Prevention Program will continue its annual campaigns promoting responsible drinking during the Carnival season.
In the Carnival season, and every year through the Ministry of Health and its daughter agency, NADA, we do put out public advisories as to how the population should conduct themselves into what they eat and drink and consume during Carnival. So I want to make an appeal through you to not only women, but to all persons that, like everything else, moderation is the key.
Now let me address something here. That news clip was from early 2025. So therefore, in that news clip, notice the presenter said Minister of Health. Well, now Mr. Terence Dialsing is the former Minister of Health. As the new Minister of Health as of 2026 is Dr. Lakram Bodo. Now that response from the former Health Minister was a response to a question put forth by the former chairman of the Joint Select Committee of Social Services and Public Administration, Dr. Paul Richards. Here is the question Dr. Richards put forth.
When the minister spoke earlier on about changing the trends, when Dr. Clapperton gave the data on alcohol consumption and food consumption, we are going into we are in the Carnival period. We're not going into, we are in the Carnival period. We have this feature called All Inclusives, which promote free drinks, free alcoholic beverages and other beverages, free food. And culturally, it's one of those paradigms that shifts Trinidad and Tobago into higher consumption for a 3-month period. Well, actually, no, it's for a 4-month period coming out of Christmas into Carnival. How does the ministry deal with that cultural aspect of trying to change the trend? Because that's a whole quarter of a year which can impact the data for the whole year, if you look at it.
Now that's a very interesting and a very pertinent question, since at the time of recording, we are a few days into the new year, and the 2026 Carnival season is a relatively short season. So therefore, the topic of alcohol consumption in the context of Carnival celebrations will take front and center stage, pardon the pun, very, very quickly. The former health minister gave this response.
Yes, thanks. Chairman, that's a very good question to ask. Overindulgence in alcohol at any time of the year is not wise. But we do tend to overdo it in the Carnival season. And every year, through the Ministry of Health and its daughter agency, NADAP, we do put out public advisories as to how the population should conduct themselves into what they eat and drink and consume during Carnival. So NADAP always does this, and 2025 is going to be no different.
Now, based on the 2025 Carnival season, the Ministry of Health, according to their social media pages, these were the two advisories that I saw on their Facebook pages during the Carnival period. And if the Ministry of Health expects that these two advisories are going to cause a major shift in the alcohol consumption of an entire population, well then, they're in for a rude awakening. And here's why. How many times is the average Trinidad and Tobago citizen going to encounter advisories like these two? And how many times is the average Trinidad and Tobago citizen going to encounter advertisements such as this?
Only white dog have eaten. Only white dog. Only white dog have eaten. It's calling. Only white dog have eaten. It's calling. Only white dog have eaten.
White Oak, when it pours, you reign.
Whether you're tripping on the road or by the beach in relax mode, whether you're playing mass or take a wind up pass, when your body is feeling rude, you come to fit, enjoy the mood. This is all you need, let your spirit come alive. Carnival is always carrying. Carnival is always carrying. Always carried, never too far away.
Better shake up. I don't know need jet plane and this white up non-stop.
But darling, you cannot leave me. Boy, look this too are we heading down to Trinity. Baby,
On the road is real must be playing, and white up brings the vibes to jump up Juve morning.
in pretty mass when dragon flag waving. Once we have white oak, we carnival winning.
It should be obvious that this video is not sponsored by any of those alcohol brands. But I hope that gives an idea of how much the odds are stacked against public health officials such as the Ministry of Health and other public health bodies. Now, to further compound the challenge of the Ministry of Health, it is not just the alcohol manufacturers promoting alcohol. The artists and creatives of Trinidad and Tobago promote alcohol as part of wheating, as part of Trinidad and Tobago culture. And this is something that has been going on for generations.
Rum and Coca-Cola went on Point Cumana, both mothers and daughters working for their Yankee dollar.
Always in custard with friends and the family. Always pick up with me cause I'm drunk and disorderly. Every weekend I'm in the jail, drunk and disorderly. Nobody to stand me there. Hey.
Rum till I die, it's rum till I die. She tell me she don't love me and that's the reason why.
One thing I need inside of the vet, give me a bottle of rum. I love me rum and me rum it love me. I'm totally drunk.
Barman give me a Guinness and punching. I suck the gin and a ginseng. My wife be home and she waiting. She waiting for some sweet loving. And wine is the new thing. See them chasing with punching.
So then I asked what she drinking. She tell me rum and Coca-Cola. So darling, come a little closer. She drinking rum and Coca-Cola all night. Then she look me in the eye. Say you ain't leaving here tonight.
As Dr. Richard said, Christmas time is also a time when alcohol consumption runs rampant. Therefore, there are many songs around Christmas time which promote alcohol consumption.
Drink a rum and a punch a cream and drink a rum. Drink a rum and a punch a cream and drink a rum.
I want some homemade wine, Madame Gloria. Give me the homemade wine.
It's nice.
I want some homemade wine,
Madame Gloria.
give me the homemade wine.
It's sweet.
One artist has even touted alcohol as a prescription.
Doctor give me prescription. A bottle of rum a day, 2 bottle of rum a day, 3 bottle of rum a day. This one called the stress medication. A bottle of rum a day, 2 bottle of rum a day, 3 bottle of rum a day.
I, Dr. Spramalang, the Surgeon General, suggest that Babash is very good for your health and for my wealth.
I feel Ravi B went by sprung along to get that prescription, but I digress. And this love affair that we in Trinidad and Tobago have with alcohol, it is not by accident. Rather, alcohol is a very important component of the Trinidad and Tobago landscape and is an important commodity in the Trinidad and Tobago economy. As a matter of fact, two titans in the Trinidad and Tobago landscape and the Trinidad and Tobago economy that produces, markets, sells, and exports alcoholic beverages are Angostura and Carib.
Angostura impacts on Trinidad and Tobago's economy is huge. As one of the oldest manufacturers in the country, it provides hundreds of jobs locally and supports thousands more through its supply chain, contributing to our GDP significantly. It makes up more than 3% of our entire economy. Because they export to more than 140 countries, it brings in a valuable source of foreign exchange, as well as boosting Trinidad and Tobago's global trade footprint. But it's not just about economics. It is a symbol of national pride. They sponsor local events, sports, cultural festivals, helping preserve and promote Trinidadian culture. For example, the Angostura Bitter Cocktail Challenge, where local bartenders create innovative cocktails. Or Angostura Tobago Sail Week, where sailors from around the Caribbean compete. Even sponsoring New Year Eve fireworks at the Queen's Park Oval. And let's not forget tourism. The Angostura Distillery attracts alcohol connoisseurs and international investors, allowing them not only to see but to taste local culture.
We would do in excess of 45,000-50,000 cases of product a day through a very robust network of over 70-80 trucks. We have 4,000 clients that we service that depend on the product. Right? Without the product, they can't run their businesses because Carib pretty much represents, in many cases, above 50% of their retail sales.
We export all the Carib Brewery portfolio of brands to 31 countries around the world. The company has allocated the resources both financially and in terms of structure to achieve the vision that I've set for the export business. There's a focus on Africa. Africa is absolutely exploding in terms of beer consumption and also consumer inquisitiveness into beer. So we are definitely exploring that with the hope of being a player in that market within the next 6 to 9 months.
Carib Brewery is immersed within the culture of Trinidad and Tobago. We support both sport and culture. When you look at our brands and our brand portfolio, we are involved in everything that is nationalistic to our country. Any event that has people, our brands are there. And when it comes to supporting culture, it is very important that we are part of it. We are Trinidad and Tobago.
Now, following up on what the lady just said, Carib Beer is the official beer partner of the Trinidad and Tobago Night Riders. Just to put some figures as to how much money these companies contribute to the Trinidad and Tobago economy, here is a table showing the taxes that these companies paid in 2023 and 2024. For Angostura, in 2023, Angostura paid almost $68 million in taxes, and in 2024, they paid almost $50 million in taxes. Now, Carib Brewery is part of Ansimakal, and they divide their portfolio into segments, and Carib Brewery falls under the construction, manufacturing, packaging, and brewing segment. Now, that segment in 2023 paid over $142 million TT, and in 2024, they paid over $181 million. So just to give an idea of how much money they contribute to the treasury of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, just to put that into perspective, if the taxes paid by the construction, manufacturing, packaging, and brewing segment of Ansimakal, if the taxes paid in 2025 are anywhere close to what was paid in 2024, those taxes will be able to cover the estimated expenses of the Office of the Parliament and the Office of the President in 2026. Well, that's if the estimates for 2026 hold true. Now, to get a greater sense of how much alcohol affects Trinidad and Tobago financially, socially, and economically, the Finance Minister recently in the 2026 budget increased excise duty on alcoholic beverages.
It is important to know that 80% of the projected revenue increases are attributable to customs duties on rum and spirits, beer, and tobacco products. Therefore, the amended duties are proposed. The following amended duties are proposed. Rum and spirits, by percent of alcohol, the existing is $79.25 by percent of alcohol. That is existing. The new proposed is $158.50. Beer, by gravity of beer, the existing duties, $5.14, proposed $10.28. Cigarettes per pack of 20, existing $5.26, proposed $10.52. Included in the list of fees to be amended are container processing fees, which were moved from $525 to $1,050. Customs declaration transaction user fee from $40 to $80. Environmental tire tax from $20 to $40. Wild animals and birds from $100 to $200. Mr. Speaker, these measures will contribute an additional $1 billion to revenue. The increase in customs duties on rum, spirits, beer, and cigarettes will take immediate effect. The increases in other fees, charges, and licenses will take effect from January 1st, 2026.
And what naturally followed was the increase in beers and rum and other alcoholic beverages.
In light of government's increase in excise duty on alcoholic drinks, both Carib Brewery and Angostura have announced price hikes on their beverages.
Carib Brewery explains there'll be an increase from $5 TT.14 to $10 TT.28 per litre. Non-alcoholic beverages, Malta and Shandy, have gone up by $1 and will now be sold for $10 TT, while beers, Carib and Stag, have increased by $2 and will now be sold for $13. Royal Extra Stout is at $15 TT and Guinness and Heineken now at $22 TT. The prices of Smirnoff Ice, Caribe, Vitamalt, Ginseng Up, Smolta, Heineken Zero and Rockstone Tonic all remain the same, and Angostura says prices have increased on all of its locally manufactured rums. Customers will now pay an average of $50 more on White Oak. A 750 milliliter bottle that once retailed at $108 will now retail at $154. Speaking to CNC3 News, Carib marketing head Antron Fort described the increase as a measured and responsible adjustment made to protect business sustainability while maintaining affordability.
So a major part of people understanding is that excise, when it was announced in the national budget, is specific to CARICOM manufactured and on locally produced brands. Therefore, those brands would attract that new excise, and we have no choice but, of course, adjust our prices accordingly. It does not affect brands that are extra regional. We're going to continue with our promotions, continue to really build excitement for the trade, more importantly, to ensure that that suggested retail price is adhered to.
Fort also pointed out that for extra regional brands are not impacted by the new duty, creating additional pressure on local brewers.
And this was the finance minister's reasoning for this measure.
Re-establishing the buffer as close as possible. That's the first thing. So we are looking at the issue even further. We couldn't take the actions because a lot more time is required, a lot more research is required as to how to do it without violating our international arrangements. 2, we continue to support the local industry in a multiplicity of ways, and that will continue. And 3, if you disaggregate what we have put down on the books as increased charges and fees and duties and etc., the impact on the individual bottle of beer, for lack of another comparator, is very small.
Additionally, some further reasoning for this measure was given by the Minister of Planning, Senator Kenny Swaratse.
What this government expects, as stated by the Finance Minister, is that the recent amendments to excise duties on tobacco and alcohol will yield an additional $1 billion, and the proposed increases are necessary to align these charges with contemporary economic conditions that will ensure the continued viability of public services, more importantly, the service of the healthcare sector. This government has given careful thought to this decision, which was not done on the whim, Madam Vice President. We approach this from the perspective that investing in health is not just about improved health outcomes, it is a catalyst for broader economic and employment benefits for all of Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore, this decision to increase excise duties on rum, spirits, beers, and tobacco is in no way a punitive measure, but a planned and well-thought-out initiative aimed at a multi-pronged result for the physical, socio-economic, and future well-being of Trinidad and Tobago. In summary, our measures to amend duties are geared towards mitigating the overconsumption of tobacco and alcohol, to provide funding support to mitigate the growth of non-communicable diseases associated with these commodities.
Now notice the Prime Minister mentioned the topic of non-communicable diseases brought about by overconsumption of the commodities alcohol and tobacco, which is the inconvenient truth, which I'm going to get into a little later on in this video, because I believe that this is something that we as a country and as individuals need to grapple with on a more serious level than in times past. Now, this increase in excise duties and the resulting increases in alcoholic beverages caused quite a bit of concern amongst the players in the alcohol industry, as highlighted by the independent senators Anthony Vieira and Mr. Francis Lewis.
These orders were published suddenly, as one stakeholder put it, like a thief in the night. To the best of my knowledge, information, and belief, there was no consultation with the hospitality sector, with importers, with distributors, or the tourism sector. Businesses had already placed Christmas and Carnival orders with containers en route to Trinidad when these new rates were gazetted. Unforeseen additional costs, disrupted cash flows, and potential breaches of existing supply contracts. The absence of prior notice or transitional period undermines business confidence and creates a perception of fiscal unpredictability. So in the event, I am concerned about the potential economic and sectoral impacts that these orders may have on the tourism, carnival, and hospitality sectors. The Caribbean tourism economy thrives on competitive pricing of experiences, including food, beverages, and entertainment. Stakeholders have warned that these increases could make Trinidad and Tobago one of the most expensive destinations in the region for alcohol consumption, discouraging visitors and making event tourism, whether it's carnival, festivals, and conferences, less viable. What's the impact on consumers and small retailers? The small man is particularly affected. The neighborhood bars, parlors, and roadside shops are integral to to our social fabric. Sharp increases in excise duties will erode their margins, force price hikes, and reduce patronage. For many low-income earners, I know my gardener complained to me because he says, that's the one thing he has to enjoy. But now, because of a beer, it's $13. So for many low-income earners, this translates into an immediate loss of purchasing power and social recreation. Decision makers have to balance public health objectives with cultural, social, and economic consideration. In particular, having regard to the fact that in this country, alcohol consumption is deeply embedded in social life. Festivals, carnival, celebrations, informal gatherings, people have drinks. This cultural integration means that abrupt or excessive increases in duties can be viewed not merely as fiscal adjustments, but as intrusions on social practices. Imposing these increases with immediate effect just before the highest retail season, Christmas going into Carnival, has been described by some stakeholders as beyond reckless.
The alcohol and beverage sector is very significant in this country, and I think it's important to just establish that. It is a major pillar of the overall food and beverage sector. Some years ago, the TTME, the TIC convention, indicated that there were over 100,000 persons directly and indirectly employed across this food and beverage sector. About 35,000 of them are in operations, small bars and shops, where alcohol products and related products to this is well over 2/3 of their sales. So changes to alcohol matters. This is not a negative, it simply is the fact of what it is. I did an online search trying to identify how many rum shops and bars there are in the country. The best estimate I could come up with is that there are sometimes for bars, it's about 1,500 to 2,000. So if you multiply 4, 5, 6 persons per bar, you get a sense of where the employment is. And that can vary by weekend, weekday, if it's a holiday, etc. And rum shops, it is somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000. So I'm talking to colleagues in the field, sales managers, sales reps, and say, how many rum shops they have in Trinidad and Tobago? They say, well, it depends, because the number of rum shops on a weekend is different from the number of rum shops in the week. I encountered that when I did a study some years ago with in the poultry industry, where we were trying to count the number of pluck shops. And you have informal or temporary pluck shops happening on the weekend, Friday, Saturday, sometimes Sunday. But you don't see them Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And it's just a pattern. It's when people come to buy. And bars can operate often informally on where they think they will sell on the weekend. But the number is fairly high. The employment impact is fairly high. Something that I remember from all of these years, I was trying to understand the economics of a rum shop. And one fellow said, easy, beer pays the bills. That is the light bill, the rent if I rent in. It pays for me to just keep this rum shop going. Rum is what pays for my family to live. It was a rough and ready calculation. And when I've tested that over the years, it seems to hold true. So this impacts, and if there's uncertainty, it can really hurt the sector. I've had people telling me, Francis, I have already sold tickets for all-inclusives or bands or fetes. I factored in a price of alcohol. I take the people money. I can't give them back their money. I can't raise the price. And this was factored on the basis of this is what I think it would cost. My response to them is, hello, you must have some kind of contingency. Yes, was the reply. I could probably handle a 20 or even 30% increase. 100%? The price of beers moved from $10, $11 to $15. That is substantial. And as of now, the anticipation is people only have so much money. So it's not that more money will be spent, but that it will impact the actual revenue earned in the establishment. One person running an all-inclusive said, listen, I factor in 2 bottles of Prosecco per customer per day. When that goes up, my margin's not big, they're small. When that goes up, it's not going to cause me a loss, but it's going to really impair my business.
And it will seem that the concerns voiced by Anthony Vieira and Francis Lewis seem to be holding true.
Some bar owners say the 100% increase in alcohol excise duties has hit the industry hard, with sales plummeting and customers cutting back on certain areas. At Club 2011 in Debe, owner Ashmir Mohammed says business has dropped as much as 50%.
I will say it very, very bluntly. They're saying they will go back to looking for cheaper rum and bush rum.
Patrons are spending less.
Who used to buy a nip, now they come and buying one small shot, and they're taking that with a beer and going about it. We used to sell a beer here for $10. Now we selling at $13. A punch and shot for $18. Now we're selling that for $28.
With sales down sharply, Mohammed says he's weighing how to keep his business afloat by possibly diversifying. Atlee's restaurant and bar in San Fernando faces the same challenge.
Disastrous. You can see, if you look around the restaurant, there's nobody here.
She says the situation is frightening.
They're not buying. They're not coming. I am looking at this weekend here to see what is happening. You know, I have to face it because there's no way I could sustain this and nobody's coming in.
Atlee adds rising costs, higher electricity bills and other taxes are squeezing small businesses beyond their limit. President of the Barkeepers and Owners Association, Satish Monasar, says the impact varies by location.
Yes, there will be an impact in certain areas where you would see certain bars have to close. As I would say, it's based on the location. The more village bars, like in the more rural areas and stuff, would have a greater effect.
Many of the bar owners we spoke to shared similar concerns, saying the hefty increase came too quickly and should have been implemented gradually.
So there's no denying the impact of this commodity called alcohol on the Trinidad and Tobago landscape, for better or for worse. Now I want to zero in on something that Minister Swarat Singh said.
In summary, our measures to amend duties are geared towards mitigating the overconsumption of tobacco and alcohol, to provide funding support to mitigate the growth of non-communicable diseases associated with these commodities.
And therein lies the proverbial elephant in the room that must be addressed. Now, when a commodity such as alcohol is normalized in our music, in advertising, in our economy, we as a population become numb to the damage that it actually causes. Alcohol becomes just a ritual to have fun and have a good time, with the only messaging being to drink responsibly and to designate a driver.
Designate, don't drink and drive.
However, on a biological level, alcohol is anything but harmless.
According to an article published by the WHO, when it comes to alcohol consumption, there is no safe amount that does not affect health. Alcohol is a toxic psychoactive substance classified as a Group 1 carcinogen by the International Agency for Research on Cancer, placing it in the highest risk category alongside asbestos and tobacco. It is linked to at least 7 types of cancer, including bowel and breast cancer, through biological mechanisms that occur as alcohol breaks down in the body.
Now, when one asks the regular man in the street, what are the health effects of alcohol, what usually comes to mind is liver disease and decreased brain function and possibly addiction. However, what most people are less aware of is the very established link between alcohol and cancer. As said in the previous video clip, alcohol is a Group 1 carcinogen. Group 1 means that there is sufficient evidence to prove that a certain substance causes cancer, and alcohol is in that group. Same group as asbestos, plutonium, and processed meat. As previously mentioned, alcohol is known to cause 7 different types of cancers. Here are the cancers that alcohol is known to cause.
Though the evidence is accumulating that alcohol drinking is also associated with pancreatic cancer, prostate cancer, and melanoma, we're pretty certain that alcohol increases risk of mouth cancer, throat cancer, esophageal cancer, colorectal cancer, liver cancer, voice box cancer, and breast cancer. Current estimates suggest that alcohol causes about 5.8% of all cancer deaths in these organs worldwide. Here's how that breaks down for men and women. In men, alcohol causes mostly head and neck cancers and gastrointestinal cancers, whereas it's mostly breast cancer in women.
Now, when I was first made aware of this information, that alcohol increases your risk of cancer, it pretty much blew me away. Now, I was aware of cancer and its effects on the liver, its effects on the brain, especially when it comes to drinking and driving, and its effects on the cardiovascular system. But cancer, that was news to me. And I'm not the only one. When I first told my wife about what I learned about the link between alcohol and cancer, she was surprised as well. And when she told her friends and the family members of her friends, you could say, did not believe her. However, one should note that more and more professionals, as time go along, are informing people about the link between alcohol and cancer.
We now know that wine doesn't help you live longer, and in fact, because alcohol is a carcinogen, people who drink more often are dying more often from cancer, including colon and breast cancer.
Did you know alcohol increases your risk for breast cancer? The first risk factor, as I mentioned, is alcohol use, something that we in the Caribbean very commonly do. Research has shown for every 10 grams of alcohol, which is about one standard drink, can increase your risk of developing breast cancer by 7% when compared to women that don't drink.
In 2026, every drink of alcohol served in Ireland will have a warning sign saying that alcohol causes cancer. Right? Every time I say that, the whole room gets quiet.
Now, this measure by Ireland, which was supposed to be done in 2026, as the previous speaker said, has been postponed to September 2028 due to economic circumstances. Now, just to confirm, Section 12, subsection 1 of the Public Health Act specific to alcohol gives certain provisions about how the labeling on alcoholic beverages is supposed to be done. Now, every label must know the direct link between alcohol and cancer, as highlighted here. But what is the mechanism, or what are the mechanisms by which alcohol increases your risk of cancer? Now, when alcohol is ingested into the body, the alcohol, it goes through the gastrointestinal tract and is eventually absorbed into the bloodstream and processed by the liver. Now, when this is done, the alcohol is broken down into a byproduct called acetaldehyde. And acetaldehyde is a very toxic and a very carcinogenic compound. Now, in this form, it cannot be maintained in the body, so it's broken down even further. But while that is done, the exposure to acetaldehyde creates the groundwork for possible cancer to form. Now, acetaldehyde is mainly produced in the liver, and that is where you have your groundwork for liver cancer. But it's also produced in small amounts in the mouth, in the throat, in the intestines, and in the rectum. Hence, you have an increased risk of cancer in these areas as well. And acetaldehyde, when it is produced in the body, what it does, it creates a groundwork for cancer by attacking your DNA, and by attacking your DNA, it also inhibits the repair process of DNA. How does it do it? As mentioned, acetaldehyde works on the DNA. It attacks it. But how does it attack it? It attacks the DNA by forming bonds with it. These bonds that they form with the originally healthy DNA is what is known as DNA adducts. Now, these DNA adducts, what they do is that they cause breaks in the strands, and these increase the chances of mutations occurring and possible cancer in the process. Now, one should know that female breast tissue is at risk via this acetaldehyde attacking DNA mechanism. However, there is another mechanism by which female breast tissue is at risk.
Alcohol has been shown to increase sex hormone levels like estrogen, which may increase breast cancer risk.
Now, some females amongst us who may have undergone breast cancer treatment may be familiar with the term aromatase inhibitors. Now, aromatase is an enzyme in the body which converts androgens to estrogen. Therefore, by inhibiting aromatase, what is done is that estrogen-sensitive breast cancer tissue, the growth of it is either slowed or stopped. Well, you may ask, what does this have to do with alcohol? Well, I'm glad you asked. Alcohol increases aromatase activity, which in turn increases estrogen production, which in turn increases the risk of estrogen-sensitive breast cancer. Now, when it comes to breast cancer, even though risk is dose-dependent, there is no evidence of a safe level of alcohol, especially when it comes to breast cancer.
Alcohol appears to cause more than 100,000 cases of breast cancer every year. Yeah, but is that just among heavy drinkers? No, all levels of evidence shows a risk relationship between alcohol consumption and the risk of breast cancer, even at low levels of consumption.
So when you hear people saying this,
do you know the general guidelines for alcohol is 1 drink a day for women and 2 drinks per day for men?
just because it's standard doesn't mean it is safe. Additionally, if you hear people saying this,
if you have to drink these. And try not to drink these at all.
My advice would be drink water and mind your business. Because when it comes to alcohol, alcohol might be the epitome of what's sweet in the goat mouth. Hey, Penguin, you could finish it off for me? Now you might ask, how much of a role has alcohol played in the cancer burden of Trinidad and Tobago? Well, first of all, let's look at what is the cancer burden over the past 20 or so years.
So, again, recently, the Ministry of Health conducted an updated review of the data contained within the Elizabeth Pulmonary Cancer Registry. And this report of 2024 captures data in Trinidad and Tobago on cancers from 2003 to 2020. And the information outlined is as follows. For the period 2003 to 2020, 43,380 individuals were diagnosed with cancer. 97.9% of those persons were over the age of 25. 49% of those diagnosed were male, and 51% were female. 39% of persons were between the ages of 60 to 74 years old. 36.2% were Afro-Trinidadians, and 23.0% were Indo-Trinidadian. In terms of the top 3 leading causes of cancer in men would be prostate cancer, followed by colorectal cancer, and then cancer of the lung and bronchus. Top 3 leading causes of cancer in women: breast cancer, followed by cancer of the uterus, and then colorectal cancer.
Now, given that breast cancer and colorectal cancer are 2 of the most common cancers in Trinidad and Tobago in terms of incidence, it's very plausible that alcohol may have played a role in the prevalence of these cancers. But how much, you might ask? We will never be 100% sure, but we can estimate. And here's how. Now, every year, the IARC, or the International Agency on Research on Cancer, which is the arm of the World Health Organization that deals with cancer research, collects data, alcohol consumption data from all over the world, and processes that data and assigns a metric to each one of the territories that it collects data from. This metric is what is known as the alcohol attribution factor, or AAF. To give a proverbial textbook definition of the alcohol attribution factor, the alcohol attribution factor can be defined as the proportion of all cases of a particular disease, in this case cancer, in a population that would be eliminated if alcohol consumption were completely removed. In other words, if the people of Trinidad and Tobago were not drinking, these are the amount of people who were diagnosed with this disease who would not have gotten this disease if alcohol was not a factor. Now, the alcohol attribution factor of a population is mainly determined by 2 criteria. The first criteria is how much people drink alcohol. And this criteria can be further subdivided into 2 criteria. The first sub-criteria is the prevalence. In other words, how much people, or what is the proportion of a population that drinks alcohol. And 2, of each one of those individuals who consume alcohol, how much alcohol do they consume on a regular basis. The second criteria of the alcohol attribution factor is how much alcohol drinking increases a specific cancer risk. In other words, compared to a non-drinker, how much of an increased risk is someone who consumes alcohol, how much of an increased risk are they subjected to with regards to a particular disease, in this case, cancer, or any specific type of cancer. Now, for Trinidad and Tobago, the alcohol attribution factor for all cancer cases in both men and women is 2%. What do I mean by that? For all of the confirmed cases of cancer in Trinidad and Tobago, 2% of those cancer cases, alcohol has played a major role in those cancers coming to realization. Now, when we break it down by gender, for all cancer cases in men, 2.6% of those cancer cases, alcohol has played the major role in those cases coming to realization. And for women, 1.4 of all cancer cases in women, alcohol has played a major role in those cancers coming to realization. Now, when I quote percentages, it might not mean much to most of you all out there. So let's break it down in terms of raw numbers so that we can see how alcohol influences health in terms of cancer in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, when we apply the alcohol attribution factor to the total number of cases, cancer cases between 2003 and 2020, when we apply the AAF of 2% to 43,380 cases, we end up with 886 cases of cancer being attributed to alcohol. In other words, 886 cases of cancer could have been prevented if these unfortunate individuals did not drink. And when we break it down by gender, 575 cases in men could have been prevented if these men did not drink. And when it comes to women, 293 cases of cancer could have been prevented in 293 women if these women did not drink. Now let's look at two cancers that alcohol is known to cause. Between 2003 and 2020, there were 7,350 cases of female breast cancer recorded in Trinidad and Tobago. This makes it the most common cancer amongst women in Trinidad and Tobago. The Trinidad and Tobago alcohol attribution factor for breast cancer, female breast cancer, was 3.7%. Now let's break that down into raw numbers. When we apply the attribution factor to the number of cases of female breast cancer between 2003 and 2020, the amount of breast cancer cases in which alcohol played the major role in breast cancer coming to fruition was 272 cases. In other words, if these 272 women were not drinking, the breast cancer would not have come to pass. Now, when it comes to colorectal cancer in females, the number of cases of colorectal cancer in women was 2,217 cases, making it the third most common cancer in women in Trinidad and Tobago. And when it comes to the men, between 2003 and 2020, there were 2,583 cases of colorectal cancer in men in Trinidad and Tobago, making it the second most prevalent cancer amongst men. Now, the Trinidad and Tobago alcohol attribution factor for colorectal cancer cases in both men and women was 7.1%. And when we break it down by gender, for men it was 10.9%, and for women it was 1.8%. Now, when we break it down into raw numbers, the number of colorectal cancer cases in which alcohol was the major factor was 341 cases of colorectal cancer. And when we break it down by men, the number of colorectal cancer cases in men in which alcohol played the major role was 282 cases, and when it came to women, the number was 59. So in other words, 341 cases of colorectal cancer could have been avoided if alcohol was totally eliminated from the picture. So the major takeaway from this data is that if alcohol consumption is drastically reduced or eliminated between 2003 and 2020, hindsight is always 2020, we could have potentially eliminated 868 cases of cancer, 271 cases of breast cancer, and 341 cases of colorectal cancer. Now, it can be easy to argue the numbers, saying that alcohol doesn't contribute that much to the cancer burden of Trinidad and Tobago. However, one thing is very clear. By reducing or eliminating your alcohol consumption, you can reduce your risk of cancer, especially breast cancer and colon cancer, in a very significant way. And there is another takeaway from that.
During the JSC inquiry on Wednesday, Director of the Non-Communicable Diseases Unit at the Ministry of Health, Dr. Maria Clapperton, presented the findings from the survey. The survey, which sampled 4,052 adults aged 18 to 69, revealed a prevalence of alcohol consumption at 51.5%, with 59.6% of males and 43.4% of females reporting alcohol use within a 30-day period.
0.9% increase between 2011 and 2024. And with respect to consumption patterns, it was observed that even though males consumed more alcohol than females, we noted a significant increase in the consumption of alcohol among females, and this was found to be an increase of 12.5%.
Given the significant increase in the prevalence of alcohol consumption in Trinidad and Tobago, this doesn't bode well for the future of Trinidad and Tobago when it comes to cancer burden. This increased alcohol consumption prevalence can mean a significantly increased cancer burden in 10 to 20 years' time. So is there anything that can be done to buck this trend of rising cancer rates and rising cancer mortality, especially when it comes to alcohol?
Alcohol, tobacco, and junk food companies increasingly seek to present themselves as objective providers of health information about their products.
This sounds oddly familiar.
CARB is very involved in lobbying for our consumers to consume our products in a responsible manner.
Now, if you have watched up to this point, you should know what responsible drinking is.
When you look at our brand advertising for our, in particular our beer brands, there are social responsibility messages that go with each one of our campaigns.
It's very important that our consumers consume our products responsibly. That way they can live to consume our products for a very, very long time.
So you see what the real end game is. But this begs another question. Should we trust manufacturers of a product to provide health and safety information about the products that they profit from? We don't ask cigarette companies to teach us about lung cancer, and we certainly don't expect the fossil fuel industry to teach us about climate change.
But health information should come from health authorities, not the 21st century's most successful drug peddlers.
And right there is how we as a nation is going to address this elephant in the room. This is how we address it with this inconvenient truth, that this commodity that is so interwoven into Trinidad and Tobago, its landscape, its social life, its economy, even its music, might be slowly and quietly killing us in all sorts of physical and social ills, including cancer. Our health professionals and institutions have to step up to the plate and give the raw, unfiltered truth about alcohol and be consistent with it without any wavering or without any waffling. And this is something which, up to this point, they have not been doing a very good job of.
And it's because these are the things that are true about alcohol and have only recently been understood to be true. And I'm not getting the sense that our population, our institutions, are educating our population enough about this. The research is probably about 15, 20 years old that tells us that alcohol is carcinogenic. But even our Cancer Society will say to our population, we still leave it up to the individual. Right? The cardiovascular research says that small amounts of alcohol is protective against both diabetes and hypertension. But last year, for the first time ever, the World Health Organization had a statement that says no amount of alcohol is safe. And that's because the association with alcohol and cancer is a straight line curve. It's not a J curve. A J curve means that there's a protective element. A straight line curve means that as your alcohol goes up, your cancer risk goes up. That's what it means. And for that reason, they've had that statement. Now, the people who are in charge of our institutions and our structures are not making that knowledge to our general population.
I think part of the reason is that some medical professionals have contrasted between their mandate and their actions, raising significant conflicts of interest. And these actions can potentially leave the person in the street confused about what to do or what not to do. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and give an example. Dr. Mariam Abdul Richards. You might remember her as one of the members of the Trinidad and Tobago COVID-19 pandemic team who gave regular updates, instructions, and guidelines to the nation on how to navigate the pandemic in those times. In November 2021, it was revealed that Dr. Richards took up a board position at Angostura Holdings Limited, a position that she held on to until July of 2025. Yep, that Angostura. Now, when it was first revealed that Dr. Richards was taking up the position at Angostura, some very relevant questions were asked, since at that time Dr. Richards was part of the COVID-19 pandemic team. Here are some of the questions that a couple of the reporters asked in a media session, and note the health minister's response, or should I say the former health minister's response.
Minister Dayal Singh, to ask you to revisit the appointment of Dr. Abdul Richards to the board of Angostura. We are asking whether or not this is something that would have had to go through the ministry for approval, and if that was done and ministry approval was given. Also, if you find that it is a conflict of interest given Dr. Abdul Richards' other profession in health and issues with alcohol, alcoholism, sugar associated with alcohol, and the NCD issue that's almost a pandemic in itself.
So I have been advised the public service regulations do not debar a public officer from taking up a board appointment as long as the appointee can perform their duties, and that has been advised to me by the public service.
Good morning again. I wanted to follow up on Kim's question about the appointment of Dr. Richards to the board of Angostura. Minister, Angostura is in the business of making alcohol, and therefore that does not align with the Ministry of Health. So therefore, on what basis was she given permission to be on the board of Angostura? Thank you.
Thank you. On the basis that the public service regulations do not debar it. And I have cleared that with the permanent secretary.
Now, based on the former health minister's response, I guess from a legal standpoint, his hands were tied, so I wouldn't put too much onus on him. However, the optics of this was not good to the public, and this was noted especially amongst civil society organizations. It even prompted a strong statement from the Trinidad and Tobago NCD Alliance. The Trinidad and Tobago NCD Alliance comprises of 9 health organizations in Trinidad and Tobago that is leading the charge against non-communicable diseases. These organizations are the Trinidad and Tobago Cancer Society, the Chest and Heart Association of Trinidad and Tobago, the Diabetes Association of Trinidad and Tobago, the Trinidad and Tobago Heart Foundation, Heartbeat International of Trinidad and Tobago, the Trinidad and Tobago Coalition for Tobacco Control, the Caribbean Sport and Development Agency, the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Nutritionists and Dietitians, and the Family Planning Association of Trinidad and Tobago. Let's hear what they had to say. The NCD Alliance urged the Principal Medical Officer, who is Dr. Richards, to reconsider her decision, noting great concern as the use of alcohol is one of the risk factors for NCDs, the priority being addressed by the Ministry of Health for improving the health of our population. The statement noted that Dr. Abdul Richards' directorship of a global beverages company which promotes the sale and consumption of alcohol with its adverse effects on physical and mental health cannot be reconciled with her role as Principal Medical Officer. And the president of the NCD Alliance went even further. The president highlighted potential issues around the perceived or actual championing of the consumption and sale of alcohol, while concurrently advocating for greater personal responsibilities and public health measures to combat COVID-19 and its NCD comorbidities. So this is my take on it. Now, before I begin, this is not about vilifying any individual. What I am saying is, this is a clear example of how structural conflicts of interest undermine public trust, even when the individuals involved genuinely believe that they can operate in separate roles. In my opinion, if one is a medical professional, appointments like this should never be considered. Dr. Richards is first and foremost a medical doctor. She should have seen and experienced the effects of chronic and excessive alcohol consumption in her patients, whether in a public or private practice. Additionally, she was a member of the Trinidad and Tobago COVID-19 pandemic team. She, out of anybody else in Trinidad and Tobago, will have been privy to the fact that COVID-19 symptoms were more severe or tended to be more severe in individuals who had comorbidities such as diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, liver disease, kidney disease, asthma, and so on. And in many of these conditions, alcohol is a significant causal or contributing factor in the development of these conditions. Oh yeah, cancer was one of those comorbidities as well. I therefore am genuinely struggling to understand how a qualified and experienced medical professional like Dr. Richards, who should be fully aware of the harms of alcohol consumption, could ethically accept the role on the board of a company that sells beverages that contain a Group 1 carcinogen. Now, this is the dilemma that Dr. Richards will face from now on. Anytime she is to mention about the ill effects of alcohol in a public setting, people will see the double standards between her words and her past actions. And this ultimately strengthens the credibility and the messaging of the alcohol industry at the expense of public health. If there is one example of clear and consistent messaging and walking the walk on that messaging when it comes to alcohol, its harms, and what can be done to mitigate its harmful effects, one name stands out of all the rest. That name is Dr. Rohan Maharaj. Dr. Maharaj is a now retired and respected medical professor from the University of the West Indies who has a background in family health, mental health, and chronic disease in a Caribbean context. He started his work on alcohol in 2012 after this personal story.
Interested in alcohol because one day, just in the time when I was wrapping up some of my work in mental health and feeling, well, maybe I should do something a little different after about 12 years with the university. I was listening to a radio advertisement. My kids, my daughter was maybe 20 and my son was 15, 16. She is now going off into university. And this is advertisement on the radio that says, ladies free before 10. No costs and drinks before 10. You come along, you can drink as much as you want. And I said, but I've just spent a couple $1 million training this young lady to be a good student. And these people out there are telling them, my daughter now, come, we'll shuttle you from St. Augustine down to Port of Spain. You could come and have fun. And I said, what the? And I felt incensed by this. I thought this was inappropriate. And I asked myself, why are we allowing this? What is happening here? And can I do anything about it?
From there, he decided to look at alcohol and the role that alcohol plays in Trinidad and Tobago. And by the way, doing quite a bit of research in this field. One of his standout studies, the National Alcohol Survey on Households in Trinidad and Tobago, also known as the NASH study, looked at the effect of alcohol on households in Trinidad and Tobago and what legislative steps people were willing to accept to legislate alcohol.
People, well, what would you like to have change around alcohol? The first thing that we found is that 87% of households in our country, there's a bar within walking distance, right? People can walk to a rum shop, right? 87%. When we asked people, do you want to change that? Surprisingly, people didn't say no. Just about half said we want that to change, and the other half said, we don't really care. But people are prepared for more labeling. They are prepared to have greater display of the harmful effects on the alcohol. They're prepared to hold sellers of alcohol responsible, large 80%. They're prepared to allow stricter breathalyzer use and increase fines for drunk driving and increase education on alcohol use. And they're prepared to pay more taxes on alcohol. When I saw that, I was, people prepared to pay more on this, and that's interesting.
He also looked at the need for an alcohol policy in the Caribbean, and in doing that, found out that steps that other jurisdictions were taking to protect their population were not being implemented in the Caribbean.
Look at alcohol policy in English-speaking Caribbean and recognize that there are huge gaps in how we handle things like advertisement, labeling, marketing. Other countries are doing things to protect their populations. Some of you may be aware that in Scotland, there's something called a minimum unit pricing. That means that there can be no discounted alcohol. You can't have a happy hour and you decide you're not going to Scotland. All right, okay. And in 2026, every drink of alcohol served in Ireland will have a warning sign saying that alcohol causes cancer. Every time I say that, the whole room gets quiet.
So he took up the task of advocating for an alcohol policy in the Caribbean, and CARICOM initially agreed to it, at least verbally, but did not back it up with action.
So we started to do some of the groundwork to say, well, what can we do as an organization? And one of the things was to establish lines of communication with CARICOM and so on. So I was invited in 2014 to give a talk to the ministers of health at Washington at PAHO. And myself and Professor Sandra Reed turned up independent of each other, me for Healthy Caribbean Coalition, she for the Ministry of Health, and gave basically two views of the same problem. CARICOM wrote some wonderful words. They said, we agree to make the reduction of alcohol-related harm a public health priority in the Caribbean, and we agree to commence the development of a regional, cultural, relevant, comprehensive policy to reduce the harmful use of alcohol. This was 2014, nothing's happened yet.
He was part of the team that created the draft alcohol policy for Trinidad and Tobago, which the People's Partnership Administration was willing to take up.
So the next year, the ECON process in Yale invited a group of people from the Caribbean, from the different islands, to come to Yale and said, let's do something on global health leadership. And so, okay, I got a group. Yvonne, there you go. Yvonne was with us. Yvonne, what was your position at the ministry then? Director of Health Promotion. We had Dr. Sunadedi and Dr. Ms. Wati from NADAP, and all three of us went to Yale, sat in a room for about a week, came up with a plan to approach the Ministry of Health, came back, wrote a draft for a policy and sent it to the ministry. The minister took it to cabinet, and cabinet approved that they will give us money to start this committee to look at creating a national policy on alcohol.
However, this is what occurred.
2 months later, governments changed and nothing's happened since.
And the government that took over the reins in 2015, this was their approach to alcohol.
Given the findings that are linked between alcohol consumption and non-communicable diseases, is the ministry considering restrictions on advertising sale of alcohol beverages?
So that will have to be a policy position. Restricting the advertising of alcohol is not something that the Ministry of Health is considering right now as a policy position. What we have always advised people to do is to make the wise choices. And it's not only about alcohol. I don't want us to focus on alcohol. It's about a lifestyle change, inclusive of alcohol, tobacco, eating better, and moving more. So it's not about banning anything. It's about nudging. I think the chairman had used the word nudging the population to achieve a healthier lifestyle and to make choices in what you consume and how you move.
Now, that government administration demitted office in 2025, and the current administration seems willing to retake that alcohol draft policy that was drafted by Dr. Maharaj and his team. At least based on this soundbite from the Ministry of Health official, Dr. Lawrence Jai Singh, in a recent panel discussion about the health effects of alcohol hosted by the Healthy Caribbean Coalition.
So the last slide basically looks at the whole issue of our not only alcohol policy but our vaping and ends policy. We have only final rounds of negotiation and in terms of consultation. So we're hoping at last rounds with Professor Maharaj again on our alcohol policy. We should get this approved either before Carnival or after Carnival, but during the month of February.
Now, Dr. Maharaj may have retired from teaching at tertiary institutions. However, he has not let up on his alcohol advocacy and work by any means. He is presently the alcohol policy advisor of the Healthy Caribbean Coalition, a non-profit organization formed through an alliance of over 100 civil society organizations throughout the Caribbean. His work at the coalition includes conceptualizing all Caribbean Alcohol Reduction Day events, and he has also presented at all of these events since 2016. And to top it off, the book which he was working on, Rum Songs and Other Alcohol Issues in the English-Speaking Caribbean, was launched in 2025, which is a culmination of the work, advocacy, and research which he has done on alcohol over the years. So in short, Dr. Maharaj is the prime example of what the medical community should be doing regarding alcohol, whilst Dr. Richards is the prime example of what not to do. And I'm not saying that each and every doctor in Trinidad and Tobago has to be advocating against alcohol consumption or excessive alcohol consumption like Dr. Maharaj. But doctors, especially Trinidad and Tobago doctors, let me ask you a question. When was the last time you told your patients about the risks of alcohol consumption? Have you told your patients, especially the female ones, that alcohol is a group 1 carcinogen? And if so, how many times have you reminded them? Have you clearly and strongly communicated the risks with your patients, especially those with a personal or family cancer history? If not, I encourage you to do so, starting from now. Case in point, I am not a medical professional. People may take what I have to say with a grain of salt. Hopefully, it's low sodium, but I digress. You are the medical professionals. You are the usual first point of reference for health, nutrition, and medical advice. People trust you with their health. Do not compromise on it. Give your patients the messaging that they need to hear and not necessarily what they want to hear. Because if you do not give them the right messaging, the alcohol industry and other sources may be giving them messages that may not be in their best interest health-wise. And this applies even more to doctors and medical professionals who have an even more public platform, whether it be traditional media or social media. Doctors like Dr. Mariana Brown, Dr. Joel Tiloxing, Dr. Sante LeBlanc, Dr. Brian Chady, even Candida Khan, registered dietitian and nutritionist, amongst others. You need to give your viewers, your listeners, your readers, your clients, and your patients the raw, unfiltered truth about alcohol and be consistent with it. Do not waver and do not waffle. Because one thing is certain, the alcohol industry is consistent with their messaging, whether we like it or not. Now, I'm not saying that the medical professionals that I just used as examples aren't doing it. All I am just asking is that these medical professionals who have an even more public platform and therefore have more influence over the decisions of their clients and their patients, the onus is on you even more to be consistent with the truth about alcohol. Because as Spider-Man's Uncle Ben once said,
with great power comes great responsibility.
I believe that if every single one of our medical professionals in Trinidad and Tobago give the straight, raw, unfiltered truth about alcohol without any wavering, without any ho or humming, or without any waffling, and have actions to back up that conviction, I believe that will change the sentiment of the population of Trinidad and Tobago towards alcohol and in turn yield the benefits thereof of improved health in the population. Dr. Maharaj has done yeoman's work in this regard, but he cannot do it alone. And he alone cannot change the minds and behaviors of every single person of Trinidad and Tobago. But if more medical professionals get on board, this may become more of a possibility and much more of a reality. And if every single medical professional be consistent with that messaging over time, the improved health in the population will last for generations to come. Don't get me wrong. It's not about perfection. It's about honesty. In other words,
in the face of this, it is time that health professionals set aside any leanings that might stem from their own drinking and convey unreservedly to their patients and the communities they serve that alcohol causes cancer.
So, if you found this video helpful, click the like button so that it shows up in front of more viewers who in turn can benefit from this content. In the next video, red wine, friend or foe?
Now, red wine is usually a better option because it is rich in antioxidants such as polyphenols, and it may benefit heart health, boosting gut health, and can reduce inflammation.
Decades ago, studies suggested that a glass or two of red wine a day might be good for your heart health. But today, many experts consider those studies to be flawed. We now know that wine doesn't help you live longer, and in fact, because alcohol is a carcinogen, people who drink more often are dying more often from cancer, including colon and breast cancer.
In other words, is it something that you want to have close to us, like UB40, or is it something that you really want to stay far away from? If you want to see my take on it, subscribe to this channel so that you will be notified of when that video first comes out. Also, if you want to get a copy of Dr. Maharaj's book, Rum Songs and Other Alcohol Issues in the English-speaking Caribbean, scan this QR code so that you can get free access to a digital copy of this book. It is very thorough, very detailed, yes, a bit heavy on the research side, but there is no doubt about the depth of knowledge that Dr. Maharaj has regarding alcohol and its side effects and how it affects people within a Caribbean setting. If you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.